Okay, it's the witching hour. Folks, welcome. This right here, right now, is the joy of being a live stream coming to you live from Brooklyn, New York. If you're joining us or seeing this anywhere on the internet at all, besides twitch.tv/deepmindfulness, come on over. We'd love for you to join the discussion. So if you're joining us, let us know where you're coming from in the chat. That's not how you spell Brooklyn. Yeah, so where are folks joining us from? It'd be great to find out where our global connection is, what it's built out of, especially since today's specific topic, if you don't know already, is going to be about how do we break out of the bounds or the boundaries of isolation, of self-isolation, of breaking through the impulse to separate everyone from us when actually we really need to stay connected if we want to stay healthy, if we want to stay supported in this way. Welcome, Leela from Hudson, Nicoya from Kansas City, Missouri. It's so funny, Nicoya, I always think that you're from the West Coast. You're on the West Coast, but I always forget it's Midwest. Our great Midwestern friend. We have Nick from Karlstad, Sweden. Welcome. Tamalan from India. Thank you so much for being here. We always love your help and support. Greetings from Toronto. Welcome. DP, nice to have you here with us. Yeah, so the general breakdown today is we're going to be meditating for about 25 minutes, and then after that we're going to have a very special lineup here. We have two special guests. We're going to be talking about ways that we can not only recognize our need for interpersonal connection, which is literally vital, but also how can we strategize. Because, people are talking about right now, planning for 6 months of what we're in the middle of. So how can we do that skillfully without losing our minds? And if anyone has never meditated for 25 minutes or that feels scary or uncomfortable, just know that that's a very, often people remark, I can't believe how quickly it went by. And usually that involves setting ourselves up well so that we don't fall into some of the classic sort of traps that people can fall into. So what I'm going to encourage folks to do is find a way to hold the body still for the duration of the practice. What that means is you're going to, John here from Jamaica, Queens, which is also known as Queens. So we're going to ask you to find a way to hold the body still for the duration of the sit. The impulse to move the body is the same impulse of the mind to sort of move and become distracted. So we're going to allow the body to be still for the duration of the sit, which means we'll have impulses to itch and move and adjust and all of these things. We're going to ignore all those. And the good news is that the body will sort of do that anyway. But when we catch ourselves itching, we say, oh, I didn't mean to do that. We know that's the same track that the mind will just become distracted on. So we veto that and then allow the body to be still. Of course, though, we are not in meditation detention, at least not yet. Not until I find out what you've done, then you'll be in meditation detention all week. No, so we're not in meditation detention. So if you need to, adjust the body or move, feel free, but maybe wait a couple breaths before you do so. That way you know that you're not doing so unconsciously. And typically, if you're sitting in a chair, or sitting on a cushion, or that kind of thing, typically I'll suggest that people arrange their knees, which one of my knees? Okay, so my knees, so that they're lower than the hips, because what this allows the hips to do is rock forward. So if you sit at the edge of the cushion or edge of the chair, the hips sort of rock forward just slightly, the knees can go down and rest, and this means the lower back can go in a natural curve, the upper back goes in its natural curve, and there's a kind of balance there. If the knees go, if the hips, if the knees go higher, what happens is it puts strain on the back, and the lower back starts to get strained versus its normal curve. So, okay. We'll begin with the meditation in a few moments. If anyone has any questions, if you're not used to meditating or you want to know what might we do, feel free. And if you're just joining us, let us know in the chat where you're coming from. It'd be lovely to have you. Nick, colors look brighter today on the stream. Yeah, we have a different camera today. Actually, the less good camera, but whatever. It's good for two people. So because Raquel's going to be here with us, so Maybe it's the better camera, actually. And what I was going to say is something about something. Yeah, either way. Oh, it's Lewis here from Sheffield. Welcome. Great to have you here. Nice to see you on the stream. And again, if anyone is watching this somewhere other than twitch.tv/deep mindfulness down here, feel free to come along and join in the chat. We're also going to be opening up, I think we're going to be opening up the Zoom for anyone else who might want to join, so we can actually see you, we can interact, especially because this is a special session around, de-isolating ourselves. And so typically when we say, hey, we can jump on Zoom, we can chat, that kind of thing, what'll happen in a human, an ordinary human, normal experience, is there'll be a little resistance, like, oh, I don't know. And as we become more isolated, sort of in our own little enclaves, that can increase. Oh, we have a new follow here. Thank you so much from Paula England. Paula, it's lovely to have you here. Paula is a fellow meditation teacher and is also a friend for some time. So nice to have you here, Paula. And let's see. So folks, finding that nice, comfortable position. And when you're ready, we will begin. Beginning by taking a few comfortable deep breaths, just feeling the body rise and fall. Allowing the eyes to close, or if we prefer, we can allow the eyes to settle on one point. Each time we arrive at a meditation, we arrive with the momentum of excuse me. Each time we arrive at a meditation, we arrive with the momentum of all of the previous moments. So if we are rushing to get here, or if we're sleepy, nervous, interested, curious, we'll be experiencing all of that momentum now. This is what our present moment experience is built out of. So if we're curious what the momentum of all of these different experiences of the mind are, of the body, what's the cumulative effect of all of our life's experiences? Well, we're being shown that right now. This is all of our sensing, all of our experiencing is that result. So nothing we can experience during this practice, even if it's judgment or a sense that things are going wonderfully or terribly, is anything other than nature. even discomfort or confusion. It's just nature expressing itself in the form of the activity of an ordinary human body-mind. And one way that we can escape the gravitational pull of all of that momentum is by grounding our awareness in the sensations of the present moment. So we'll begin by sweeping through the body to be sure we're not holding any undue tension. Starting at the top of the head, relax the brow. Relax the muscles behind the eyes, allowing the eyes to drop ever so slightly into the skull. Allowing the face to go smooth. Relaxing the back of the tongue, allowing it also to drop just slightly. And letting the jaw go slack. No need to hold it closed. Relaxing the neck and the shoulders. The upper arms, elbows, forearms, wrists, and relaxing the hands, letting go of any impulses to move the hands or any other part of the body, just allowing the body to be still. And the hands have a huge collection of nerve endings, so noticing the high definition sensory experience of human hands. And letting go of any attempt to control the breath, letting the body breathe as it will. Noticing the natural tightening and relaxing of the upper chest and upper back as the breath comes and goes. Relaxing the belly and the lower back. Relaxing the hips and the upper legs. The knees and calves. Relaxing the ankles and relaxing the feet. And now I'd like us to bring our attention to the sensations of the breath, wherever we might notice them. For some, this may be at the tip of the nose, or in the rising and falling of the shoulders, or perhaps the abdomen itself rising and falling. Picking one area. And seeing if we can discover the unique experience of the breath in this particular moment, knowing that these particular sensations in this particular moment will never be experienced again. This is our one opportunity to detect them. And some part of the mind will likely tell us that these sensations aren't that important, that you've detected them or felt them a million times before. So we're going to ignore that part of the mind. Recognizing that we've never detected these particular sensations in this particular moment. And we're going to use a mental label each time we detect these particular sensations in this particular moment. We're going to call that phenomena this precise sensation in this precise moment. So in the mind, we can simply say the word this each time we come in contact. In the mind, it might sound like this, picking a pace that works for us. And of course, it's natural that distractions will arise. This is part of the nature of the mind. So anytime a distraction arises, a judgment about how this is going, a sound, a different body sensation or thought, it's not a problem. And we can simply label that not this. It's not something to be pushed away. It's simply not this. And returning back to this. Being sure to be respectful of this. What are we referring to? Each time we use the word, it actually has a different definition. We're referring to this precise sensation in this precise moment. So each time it's different. And being sure we're respectful of this new definition each time. So at any given moment, we're either in contact with this, with not this, or we've simply drifted away. At any point, just simply steering our way back to this. Now we're going to make a slight change. I'd like us to open up to what we've been calling not this. Every other sensation. So we're letting go of every restriction in this practice. And trying to experience it as one large set of data, all of not this. Allowing the breath sensations to be included. So it's all sensation as one large pool. And at every given point, the mind might be pulled to a particular sensation. That's fine. Just being pulled to a different definition of this. So allowing that to be experienced in the pool of not this, the large experience of all of our sensing. None of it's a problem. It's the nature of the mind to jump to specific pointed detail. And it's the nature of the mind to open and include a large swath of experience. we can keep the label not this, or if we'd like, we could use the label all to describe this large field of sensing. So at any given time in the mind, we can label this if we're drawn to a particular sensation, particular sound, thought. And allowing ourselves to zoom out, to refer to all, a grouping of these different sensations in the body, the mind, sound. So in the mind, it might sound something like all, this, all, all, all. You get the idea. And now we're going to use this skill we've been developing, noticing all, noticing parts, to see if there's any part of our experience that would like this present moment to be different. That wants this meditation to end, or wants it to go on forever. That wants to get to a to-do list. Wants some of that discomfort to go away. Again, this isn't a problem. This is nature. We can simply label that part this, noticing where it's occurring in the body, where it's occurring physically in the mind, if it's in the head, or as though it's happening around us, or if it's emotion in the body. And then slowly zooming out to include it with all of the other sensations. Recognizing that no matter what's happening, if we like or dislike what's occurring, if we're craving for a future that's different, whatever emotion is arising. It's all nature, just dancing. Mixing, swirling together. And this next part is quite important. This is where we're going to use all of these skills. Staying with the practice, staying in stillness, allowing a tiny bit of light to enter the eyes, and eventually allowing the eyes to rest on a single point as they fully open. Again, staying with the practice, staying in stillness. Noticing we'll have impulses to move or adjust. And recognizing these as simply a part. And letting that melt into the larger whole of our greater experience. Experiencing the momentum of having done a meditation practice. Doing a meditation practice. And letting this moment here, as we sit with our eyes open, as we do much of our day, be the great teacher. Showing us that with a bit of practice, it's entirely possible to bring this practice into every aspect of our lives. Okay, so welcome folks who are just joining, folks who've been here. Very lovely to have you. So we have a very special guest here coming in. It's our lovely friend, Raquel.
Hi.
Here's the camera. That one.
Oh, that one.
Yeah, that one. Here we can shift.
It's an unsustainable posture.
Yeah, pick something that'll last. And we can scooch this over.
Okay, great.
Great. Okay. So folks, if you're new here, welcome Zephyra or Zephyra H. Welcome. Good to see you. Glad you were able to join us a little late. Just a reminder, if this is your first time here, feel free to follow. This will give you updates for when we go live. This will give you the possibility of knowing when we're doing more stuff. It'd be great to have you here. And let us know what happened in that meditation. There's a couple different ways that we can find out about what happened in your meditation. One is that we can break into your house at night and listen to your sleep talking and just take notes. It's one way.
We're assuming you all talk in your sleep.
Yeah. Like I said, it's one way. But a much more efficient way is if you tell us what happened. That is definitely a simpler and easier way. Catherine, I'm glad you're here. Well, the meditation will be on our playback, and our friend Tomlin will be here. Oh, hello, Renee. Good to see you.
Hi, Catherine.
Hi. Okay, so Tamalin, our good friend from who's joining us from India, would you mind putting in our second YouTube channel? It's actually pretty easy. It's youtube.com/deepmindfulness2, the number 2. And all the playbacks are there. This is actually playing there live right now, but the playbacks are all there. So if you want to see the meditation, that's where it'll be. If you want to do it again, we got a whole library of those suckers. So, what was that like? What happened in your experience? Was it challenging? Was it easy? The main themes we were talking about was basically that everything that's happening in our experience is nature. Everything that is occurring is acceptable, and the mind is going to navigate it in different ways. And often we treat things as sort of outside. It shouldn't be happening. We shouldn't be feeling X, Y, and Z. And we really want to, ideally, accept those as just parts of ourselves. And maybe you want to talk a little bit about, we want to make sure your mic is working. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about how that relates to today's theme about breaking free of isolation.
Oh, yeah. Well, I had a slightly sideways thing to say.
Please. Thanks. That's so sweet. We just got a follow from Sarah Vogwill. Thank you so
Sarah.
much.
So I've been thinking a lot about self-compassion in this weirdo time that we are in, and how that relates to meditation practices, sometimes some of the assumptions that we can have about how we're supposed to be or feel as meditators. So there's actually a lot of really strong research on the power of self-compassion, which I've been really diving into recently and feeling really excited about. And I wanted to share with you guys that one of the things that's been demonstrated through research about self-compassion is that self-compassion can actually be a protective factor in terms of not developing trauma symptoms after experiencing potentially traumatic experiences. So,
which we're in the middle of to some degree, right? We're in the middle of.
Exactly. This is like a huge upheaval. So something that I've been thinking a lot about recently is like, what do we regard as powerful in our lives? And I think sometimes there's a default, like cultural assumption. I know I have this assumption in my mind sometimes that like aggressive things are powerful, or like pushing myself is powerful. So I really want to emphasize that right now, what can be really powerful in our lives is compassion. And that can seem soft, or like, what will that really have an impact? And so that's part of why I wanted to bring in this research finding that yes, self-compassion, compassion in general, is super impactful. It can actually protect us to some extent from experiencing post-traumatic symptoms when we go through traumatic experiences. And so I also would love to talk a little bit about what self-compassion looks like.
Yeah. Well, also, I just before we jump into that, because I think that's really important, I just want to do draw the little bit of a link between
please.
The meditation. So a lot of what we're talking about is this relationship of these different pieces of ourselves and sort of how we relate to them. We're pushing them aside. I think a lot of people might say, well, I don't want to have to rely on other people. I want to be able to be totally independent. I don't want to have to deal with that. But part of what it is recognizing that our need for connection is related to our inner experience of a need for the parts of ourselves to be okay. So that there's a part of ourselves that really wants to connect with people and a part of ourselves that actually just wants to hang out at home and watch lots of movies. And letting all of those parts be there is part of the nature of finding fulfillment. And so letting these parts inside of us be there, be okay, be nature is part of the process of recognizing what's happening. So let us know what happened in your meditation. Drop us a report here in the chat and we'll address that. If you have any questions about the practice itself, we're happy to answer those questions also. And then we're going to get into the meat of the topic, which is talking about how
I was excited. Wow. I made a face.
Wow. Talking about how we can break through this general phase of our lives that we're in right now, this sort of really strange moment, how we can use these meditation tools to live a richer, more powerful life. And there's a few things. Also, we have a very special guest with us who we'll be bringing on very soon.
Can I just draw a connection between what you're saying and what I'm saying? I brought self-compassion up partly because it's been on my mind and because I think it's a term that sort of neat that we can use for
Yeah.
some of the stuff that you were
Exactly.
talking about. So part of what we can think about when we think about self-compassion is just remembering, like, everything we're feeling right now is so natural. It is okay to feel however you feel. It's natural to feel angry right now. It's natural to feel scared right now. It's natural to feel confused right now. It's natural to feel overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And this is part of the attitude of self-compassion, which I think is part of what this meditation was cultivating. And it's like such an important reminder throughout the day. And it's related to this topic of isolation because this theme of common humanity is also a big part of self-compassion.
Yeah.
That, like, I am not the only one feeling this right now. Whatever I'm experiencing is part of being a human in these conditions. And that's part of what we need to communicate with each other in order to be reminded that sometimes.
Absolutely. So here's what our thought was. We are going to, a few things. We wanted to talk about this in terms of, first, our need for human connection, our absolute vital. It's not even a sort of like, it's as vital as food and water. So we're talking about stockpiling our, people stockpiling toilet paper, which is totally unnecessary, by the way. Just buy what you need and there wouldn't be a shortage. Stockpiling food, stockpiling these things. We really need to think about this idea of stockpiling connection because we're going to need it. And depending on how long this is, we're going to need it more and more. So one thing is the need for our interpersonal relationships. The next thing is talking about the potential downside of not having those things. And then we're going to talk about strategies to that we can use. And we definitely want to hear from you. What are your strategies? And we're going to actually give a chance for you to, if you want to, jump on live and tell us about what strategies you might be using. If anyone here is a long-time participant, any of the folks we've seen a million times, Nick or who else is on here? A million people. You can jump on. We'll give you a link in a little while to jump on to our Zoom. And why don't we start a little bit with the our evolutionary need and how we're built evolutionarily for a need for connection.
Oh, sure.
We got, just real quick, we got a couple follows. One is from DTAC. Welcome, DTAC. And another one is from Bernie is cool. Well, hey, listen, I agree. And then we have another one here from Chris Schultz. Oh, Schultz, maybe Schultz. Okay, Chris, welcome. So good to have you here. Thank you so much. Chrisicles. I love that. Okay, excellent. Okay, so yeah, why don't we talk a little bit about the evolutionary need?
Sure. I feel like I'm like the research buddy today. So there's this guy named John Bowlby who did some really important research. He's one of the founders of attachment theory, which is a really important theory area in psychology. And he first looked at all this research on animals and saw how animals have these just like instinctual systems built in. Like, you don't have to teach animals to go find food necessarily. You don't have to teach them to shake it off when they are overwhelmed. There are just behaviors that they get. It's like built into the spaceship. And then he took that research and started to look at humans and saw that, okay, humans have some similar instinctual stuff built in, like we need food, we need water. And then he noticed there was this other instinctual system for secure connection with other people. And this like blew open the field of psychology because people were like, oh, babies just love their mothers because they gave them milk. If a robot gave them milk, they would love the robot. But then they found like that's not actually the case. Humans have a need for connection, warmth, comfort, security with each other just as much as we need food and water.
Yeah. And so if we look at this from an evolutionary psychology perspective, which is not, I wouldn't call that exactly as scientific as Bowlby's work, but it's a field that I like. I find it a useful framing. We are wired fundamentally to be in small groups and see the same people and stay connected in this way for our entire lives. We're really wired to be around maybe 20 people, and every tragedy that occurs is a group tragedy, is processed with the group. Every triumph, every birth, every new set found of of food is transferred into that small group. It's, roaming on the plane, just looking for ways to survive. And that's what our wiring is still built out of. And we've been moving so quickly in our current age, we all know, that I think the reason social media and sort of like this sort of disconnected way of relating to each other has worked up to now is because we actually do have human connections. So we can stand having a sort of pretty distant relationship to the world and have it just be a scrolling feed, and it's not a real sort of solid connection because we actually have human connections. But now suddenly a lot of people are self-isolating like we're doing, and all of our actual human connections are sort of very quickly. Our work connections, our friends, these kind of things, it's like they're disappearing. So just connecting by social media and running through a scroll is really, really not going to cut it, and is actually going to drive, I think, a lot of people crazy. I think we're going to watch, depression rates and suicide rates skyrocket during this period. So, what do we do? How do we handle that? Yeah. And actually, I wanted to take a moment here. This is a little bit sort of funny, but the cropping's a little off. I wanted to share. I want to make sure our friend is still here. Yes.
Oh, let me close out my.
Oh yeah, you close out yours. Okay, so I'm going to share. I want to open up to our friend Nicoya. Nicoya is a great friend and is really lovely. Has some great thoughts on a lot of this stuff. We've talked about it many times in the past. So I want to bring in. Let's see if this will work. See if we have technical challenges or not. Okay. See, this is what we see while we're filming, and so let's see. Okay, it should be the case if I'm not correct. Yes, okay, you can see Nicoya. Now let's just check if we can hear Nicoya. Go ahead, Nicoya.
Hey there.
We can hear you.
So many screen things happening here. It's magic.
Yeah.
Magic is happening.
Hello, welcome to see us. So yeah, I don't know if you wanted to add anything to what we were just talking about.
Oh, well, I mean, just to reiterate, the self-compassion piece and how it works with the fact that all these different parts of ourselves are always kind of coming and going and responding to what's going on, and how important that recognition is that we're not the only people experiencing this process. Like, this is the fundamental thing that it is to be human. That can be for me, that has been a great source of comfort. So I was really happy to hear both of you bringing those ideas up. One thing that occurred to me, my aunt has been obstetric and neonatal intensive care nurse for decades. And to kind of re-emphasize what Raquel was saying is like that we're just wired for this human connection, is that there's also research, and I can't quote names, like Raquel was so professional with that and prepared, but just showing that having physical contact has a huge impact on survival rates of premature babies. And so in neonatal intensive care units, they will actually go to pretty extreme lengths to still find ways for parents or humans to be in contact with the babies. Even, like the benefits have been found to outweigh a lot of the risks. And so even if it means doing all these extensive scrub down routines and getting into protective gear, just that process of that baby being able to detect that there is another human being nearby, whether it's heart or warmth, has such a huge impact. And so when we're in this situation of social distancing, I think that reiterates that as adults, we can kind of find that way to recall our bodies and our minds have this sort of memory built in of what it's been like to experience that wonderful healing contact and sense of connection throughout our life. And we can use meditation and mindfulness in these situations where we don't have access to as much physical contact to actively recall that state. And that can be a nice counterbalance. So that was one of the first things that came up for me when I was listening to you guys talk.
That's great. Thank you. Let's see here. Getting back to the other shot. Yeah, and a couple things we want to bring in here is that it's important to remember that we're built to share trauma. We're built to have those experience of process trauma together. And this is a shared trauma. And I think that part of the recognition is to recognize, hey, the strangeness that's coming up, it's coming up with other people too. They're having similar or parallel experiences. And so there's a physiological, neurological need for contact with other human beings, and not just physical contact, but emotional regulation. And part of this, another added part, is the psychological need, which is we navigate the world through various perspectives. Some of them are ordinary, what we think of as our self, but there's actually many perspectives that we view the world from. And what happens when we get more and more isolated, you've probably had the experience, I've had the experience before, I've been on a retreat where it's, basically I'm not talking to anyone for a long period of time. And you come out and you're like, how do I communicate again? Like we forget, and those skills of connecting and interacting get reduced. And part of that is what's called mentalizing, recognizing, okay, this is my personal view of the world, and it's just a view. It's not the pure essence of reality. Hey, and this other person has maybe a different view of the world. And because of this richness of views, we have a really much more robust experience of ourselves. And what starts to happen is if we have fewer and fewer views that we're interacting with, that experience of self can get more and more sort of isolated in that way. Yeah. I don't know if you want to talk about that at all. You don't have to.
I couldn't hear Nicoya because I don't have headphones. So.
Oh my God, that's a technical issue we had not thought of. Okay, well.
Raquel, your psychic detection's not working.
You're saying that your psychic detection isn't working. Okay, we'll as we speak, we'll try to figure out how to resolve that, because that's a pretty silly oversight. We're adding more. Every time we add more details, it always gets like one more layer. Okay, please.
I am having a thought.
Yes.
I'm almost wanting to take this conversation back a step.
Please.
And I have been noticing in a lot of my communities that I feel like I'm like reading the Times and reading Twitter and like looking at all these articles, and I know that can be really hard and intense for people, and I'm feeling like I want to share some of the context for what we're talking about and some of the importance of what we're talking about, and some distinctions. So we're talking about like physical distancing and like why and what does that mean, and you go with going in that direction?
Sure.
Okay, so I just want to back it up just to share some context that has been really powerful and important for me to see. I know I had a response when coronavirus first came into the collective consciousness here, of like, I get the flu sometimes, like it's cool, no big deal, wash your hands, go to work, whatever.
If I get sick, hey, I can survive it.
Yeah, I'm tough, I'm healthy, like whatevs. Everybody's all like making a big deal about this. It's just a cold. And as I have read more from epidemiological experts, the Times, what was it?
Washington Post, yeah.
Washington Post. I am really seeing how seriously I think it is important for us to take this. And I think this is a place where we get to be discerning without needing to feel panicked. Just like, how are things right now? And how can we support each other and impact each other? So Janusz is pulling up right now this article in the Washington Post that shows really the impact that our personal actions can have in the spread or not spread of this illness. While it's true that many of us might be able to get this sickness and weather it and come out okay, I think this is really an important time for what I would call ecological thinking. Really recognizing that we are so interconnected, and there can actually be something very empowering about this. Like, I know I often feel like, there are these things I care about so much, but like, how do I as an individual make a difference in my society or community? And this is a moment when our actions can make such a big difference. And so, as many of you have probably heard, there's a strong suggestion in the United States and in many other countries. I know we have an international crew here. Stay home. People are calling it social distancing. I saw a meditation teacher, Sebene Selassie, who's great, recently that she wishes we were calling it physical distancing, because we don't actually have to distance ourselves socially, but it is absolutely vital that we distance ourselves physically. And what distancing ourselves physically will do is reduce the number of cases that are happening at any given time. And if we don't do that, our healthcare system may not have the capacity to care for all of us. So we get to have a huge influence in how our entire society moves through this really difficult time by caring for our own actions in a skillful and socially responsible, ecologically thinking way, and staying home. And so while we're doing that physical distancing, this is where the conversation we're having today comes in, that can sort of slip into social isolation, and that doesn't have to happen.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to provide the context of really how important it is to stay home, and how it can be part of our meditative practice of taking skillful action, practicing non-harming, to stay home as much as possible.
Yeah.
And I had to advocate pretty actively with my employer to make that happen. So if you're in a situation like that, I'm happy to talk with you as well.
Yeah, and of course some people are in situations where they cannot make that decision.
Absolutely.
They have to go to work, they have, etc. So just to remember, we talk about, we sort of talk about like the folks that we feel like are more on the wacky end, who are like, vaccines don't work, we don't need vaccines. And actually, it's like some kids can get sick from vaccines. And it's like, yes, that's actually the reason everyone has to take them, is because some kids cannot take them. And if nobody takes them, then those kids are going to die. And so this is the exact same situation, that some people cannot skip work. They cannot. So they're going to be in a much higher danger situation. So if we can stay home, it's our obligation, in the same way it's our obligation to take vaccines. So I want to point to this. I'm going to go back to this this graph here. So this is infections occurring. The orange dots are people infected, and this is if the society has no separation or no sort of divides, everyone's just intermingling. It basically means eventually, everyone is going to have some contact with it, and then people will they'll turn this, in this case, purple, which means they've already had it and they can't pass it on anymore. The thing is that this is actually also an illustration of what we can do, which is not only just isolate ourselves, but talk to people about how important this is. We'll link this article in the chat, and just remember that by telling people, hey, like, we need to do this, we have a collective responsibility to do this, it is exponential in the same way it's exponential here. We actually, Raquel didn't have time to do this today, but she was like, how can we make an impact given that, this is happening? I said, what we're doing now is potentially exponential, because we're telling many people about this exact detail, that we need to spread this a little far and wide. So we're going to put this in the chat so that if you want to, you can share this particular article too about our responsibilities in that way.
Yeah, and please share it. I think, like, this graph shows how a sickness can spread, and we can also think about that as how a really important idea can spread if we share it.
Exactly.
Can you make the numbers visible? Because the numbers are really important.
Yeah, so here is an example of some social isolation, and the isolation is going down bit by bit. And so
this is like a quarantine that's being released over time.
Being released too soon. Mm-hmm. And it just shows that actually it has not no effect, but has very little effect, and still everyone gets a huge amount of infection. So the curve here of the orange is significant, like how quickly it curves over time. And then we go to another one that shows, I think this is, which one is this? This
is if 75% of people do social distancing.
Right. So this is if 75%, which is a very high number, which, again, super important. But
one of the things that's really important to look at here is how quickly this curve of the increase in people getting sick, how steep that curve is. Because part of what we need to do is keep this curve gradual enough that our healthcare system will be able to accommodate all the people who get sick.
Yeah. And not to be overly morbid in any way, but there's, on the upside, if this doesn't go well, we're talking about millions of people passing away, and the elderly are our most vulnerable. Actually, they say that children are actually in a better position than, we thought they were. And that said, it still just means that the people who are, older. So this is if
This is if only one of every 8 people does not practice social distancing.
So 1 out of 8.
So you can see how shallow this curve is and how many fewer people get sick. Like, think about this compared to the first simulation we watched. It's friggin' mind-blowing.
Yeah, and these are life and death, and each person who gets it they might not even know that they're a carrier. So this is the context in which we're saying, it's really our responsibility. Like, I know it sounds it's like grim and that kind of thing, but just remember, right here we're talking about lives. These are people's entire lives. This is the luxury that we have of being able to meditate and see all these beautiful sensing experiences that are occurring right now. That's pretty goddamn luxurious. We're talking about the potential end or hindrance of that significantly for large numbers of people. And so, moderate social distancing means this curve stays here and hospitals are able to handle it. That's the other thing, is we have enough capacity for hospitals for like maybe not a tenth, probably like maybe a quarter, maybe like a little less of all the people if we have, if we're in this second panel here. And then if there's extensive social distancing, it's a much slower curve in that way.
So I hope this can illustrate how important this is. Something that I've been feeling really pressing on me and pressing to share, just like how big an impact our individual actions in terms of maintaining physical distance from others, like what a huge impact that can have on the entire society. Even if we feel well right now, we could still be carrying symptoms. The New York City Health governmental organization recently put out a tweet this morning that said, their advisement is that we all act as though we were carriers. So think about coming into contact with people assuming that you are a carrier, knowing that could be a possibility. So I wanted to highlight that as just a really important piece of what we're talking about, and some background for why we're talking about staying physically distant from one another. And so I wanted to have that as the backdrop as we talk about how do we not feel isolated and not cut off this vital human need for connection as we're doing this really important thing for society of keeping ourselves physically separate.
Absolutely. And so now we want to jump into talking about strategies. What strategies can we do and the strategies for personal isolation, actually, I think we'll look for the link from how to shop for food.
Yeah.
So it's a really helpful link as far as is it less ethical to ask a delivery person to come and go around, et cetera. So we'll link that as well if we can. If anyone wants to actually find that would be a big help. It's an Atlantic article about how to shop for food. It came out recently, and throw that in the chat. What was I going to say?
We have some comments in the chat. Should we take a look
at that?
Yeah.
Okay. So here we have some reports, and we can jump back to that. Let's see. Let's see. Detectorp says, recompassion, isolation is a compassionate act for others. Exactly. So we're talking about the relationship of inner and outer compassion here. Perfect. Social distancing is to show that to slow the spread. Slow the spread and make sure hospitals don't get overrun. As a culture, we are coming together to take care of our elderly and vulnerable. We can do this out of compassion or as opposed to fear.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point.
Yeah. And what's it called? People who work in, Nick is talking about people who work in university with thousands of students every day. Exactly. And let's see.
One of the reasons I actually felt like it was so important and felt so compelled to share this today is I'm noticing that people in leadership positions are not necessarily the people who are most informed about what's going on and what is important. So I think that we can all have a role to play in managing up with the people who are in positions of power but may not feel the urgency of the moment that we're in, or have the information to understand why it would be important to institute institution-wide policies about enabling people whose jobs can be done remotely to do those remotely, etc.
Yeah.
So we can share this information up in addition to sharing it out with our peers.
And let's see, RadBSN says, we still don't know if we can reinfect or not. Other reasons to practice physical distancing. There are cases of people getting through the virus, and the sense would be that then you couldn't reinfect, but there's some indication that that might not be the case right now. Oh, good. So Nicoya shared this link here right in the chat. So that's the article on how to shop for food. Is really excellent, and it's a broader view of this. Landon says, "Thank you for this. While I've read and listened to tons of sources on the crisis, this conversation pulled it together and grounded it in what I can do going forward." That's great.
Awesome.
And so
glad.
what we're going to dive into now, what we want to also hear from you around this, is strategies. Strategies so that what do we do as far as we got the detail around physical, we could say physical isolation, but not social distancing. How do we have our social connections be as strong as they can, given the fact that it's going to be more on the virtual side, and not have it just be like scrolling through, liking people's pictures of their vacations that they are not on now, that kind of thing. So one of the strategies that we are thinking about is this idea of quality over quantity. And quantity, you have 1,000 people scrolling by, and there's a lot of people. Hey, I'm in contact with a lot of people. But remembering again that we're wired to have, we really can only have a certain number of close connections. We're not really wired to have that many more than 20. And there's studies showing that it's hard for people to hold more than 5 people as relatively close friends. So just know that it's most important actually that we have a quality contact. So do you want to talk about what that might mean?
Well, I want to tie this back to the conversation around compassion that we were having earlier, that part of what having connection with other people can do is show this piece of shared humanity. That we are not in this alone, and we are likely having similar feelings to lots of people around us. So when we're talking about quality over quantity, part of what we're talking about are like, who are the people who you can connect with, and in what ways can you connect with them that will give you that sense of shared humanity, which sometimes like scrolling through a feed isn't necessarily going to do. Sometimes it can. Yeah.
And in a second, we'll jump over to Nicoya to see if you have any specific strategies. But one of the strategies that I've been using, and it's been really grateful, is I have a gratitude list with some friends. And, there's plenty of research showing that listing 3 things we're grateful for in any particular day is going to rewire the system and change the way we're relating to the world and people and increase our health. So something we mentioned on a previous stream was that the stress levels that are being produced by this are actually degrading our immune system, which is the exact opposite of what people want to do. So in that case, we want to prepare and figure out ways to chill out. And what I'm talking about here in particular is not only just chill out and get back to a neutral, but actually move towards a more resilient place. And a gratitude list can be a great way to do that. And I used even just the text chain and just connecting with friends. And again, it's not, by voice, but it's a great way to actually hear what's going on in their lives, and they're grateful for their children, and they're grateful for, these little things, and I get to have to look around and force my mind into being grateful rather than just force my mind into being nervous and worried about all these different things.
One thing that I've been doing with some of my friends is scheduling FaceTime calls and Zoom calls and whatever platform you want to use. So we've been doing one-on-one and also in small groups. And that's been really amazing for staying up to date in each other's lives and just having that like nourishment of seeing and talking with another human who we love each other. It's so important.
Yeah. Okay,
we got some doodle polls going. It's great.
Yeah, exactly.
Worth the effort.
So I'm going to jump over here to Nicoya, and I'll try to peek this out so you can, let's see here. Okay. Nicoya, any thoughts on this particular issue?
Yeah, I just really what you said about quality over quantity is such a great principle to start with. And I was actually taken back as this has started to happen. I was taken back to a period in my life which was kind of pre-internet, and I was living in Manila in the Philippines. So I was a foreign exchange student, and I was on this big campus that was closed for the holidays. There were no other foreign students there. It took a month for a letter to arrive for my parents. The only way that I could phone call anybody internationally, which was super expensive, by the way, was to actually go during the middle of the night because the time zones were so different, wake up, like, get the security guard for the building, let me into one of the school offices and go through this really complicated process of dialing my parents so that they could then call me back. And so obviously that was like a special occasion that we had to coordinate. And so I went through this period of being super isolated. And I was in a culture where things were still pretty strange, even though I'd been there for a couple of months. So this whole period kind of brought me back to that. What did I do? Well, I was young and I didn't really know. I didn't have any sense of how important connection was. So I didn't have a lot of great strategies. But thinking about like old school, any way that you can verbally communicate with somebody, FaceTime, Zoom, these are all fantastic. But you know, maybe you have people in your life that you want to connect with who don't do that. My 94-year-old grandmother is obviously very high risk. I usually see her at least once a week, but we're all being very cautious. And so phone calls, you know, the journaling, the gratitude list is also just such a great practical strategy. Expressive writing is something I have found very helpful, which is just let it all out, get it all out on paper. What are you feeling about? And that can actually kind of give you this third party of like, connecting with yourself and seeing all these things that are going on. And then another thing that's coming up for me hearing this whole discussion is how important it is to connect with our own physical presence. And sometimes if we're like trying to monitor our physical presence with other people, we're kind of locking ourselves into this tension in our body. And so finding ways to reconnect with our body and support it and honor it through mindful movement can be really fantastic. You know, find ways to get your exercise. Going outdoors is, everybody, you know, all the health professionals that I have read are like, yes, do that. Go outside, enjoy the fresh air, because that's a big immune booster too. So those are just some highlights that came up for me as I was listening to you guys.
Yeah, that's great. And that actually gets back to our discussion over there about quality over quantity. You know, I have a biological sexed male body, and so what I've discovered and through some research is that the male brain is often not so terribly hardwired for connection. It's just not. There's fewer lines of connection between the left and right hemisphere, which is basically where we'd have empathetic connections. So often I find that with friends who you know, identify as male, the experience is that all of our conversations are sort of like not superficial, but it can just be about, you know, just jokes and opinions, just like, that movie was terrible, like whatever. And so part of it is to recognize, like, part of what we need to do is be able to express our inner landscape, what is actually occurring for us. And I think what Nicoya was saying about doing that inner writing is to get clear on what our own experience is. This is hard. This is challenging. Hey, I'm actually having a good time because of X, Y, and Z, and to be able to share that. And I think something else you pointed to, Nicoya, was really, really central, which is that for me, being of service and giving to other people is so fundamentally fulfilling that, hey, guess what? I made it my entire, you know, life and career and job, and et cetera. So, there are people who are much more vulnerable than us. We mentioned, you know, sort of elderly folks or people who might be a little bit more isolated. And I realized I forgot some people in that list because they didn't seem elderly to me for a really long time. They just seemed like, oh, they're older friends, etc. And now I think about it, it's like, oh, wait, no, they are actually in the vulnerable group.
Even people in their 60s who might not seem like old people. They're like still bopping about. But
exactly.
Their systems might be a little more sensitive.
So just contacting them, because they're probably going to have to isolate a little harder than a lot of other people. So seeing if we can give them anything, or just talking. I mean, people need human connection. We regulate emotion through our interactions with other people. This is so common that actually, if you ever notice, you're looking at someone in public and you need to look away because it's staring at something, or you meet someone who's like, hey, how you doing? Like they can't break eye contact.
Close talkers.
Close talkers, or even just like people who are like, you know, that's how you know someone's a little bit off. They like can't break eye contact because we're actually managing emotion. what's happening is, okay, we connect a little bit much. Okay, cool. We come back. Okay. And so even our eye contact is an indication of what's happening for us emotionally, which is actually a great strategy to recognize our emotional experience looking at eye contact. Not that we're supposed to stare at each other or anything. Kathy says, my kids are calling me elderly. And once I accepted the word, I'm really appreciated their support and love and protection. Yeah, and even if it's not, it just maybe a little more vulnerable. That's in that category.
And there are likely lots of people in our lives who don't, quote unquote, look vulnerable, but have some kind of immune system compromise. So really, this is a time to be checking in on all of our loved ones.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that we get to experience the support that comes from supporting others.
Absolutely. So what we're going to do now is we're going to what we're going to call open up the lines, and we're going to, if you're here on the Twitch channel, we're going to open up the Zoom. So if you'd like to jump in and talk about your strategies or any challenges you're having, you can follow this link, and this will put you right in here live. And of course, no pressure, but it'd be lovely to hear from folks. What strategies are you using? What are you trying? What challenges are arising? I think some challenges that are arising for Raquel and I is that we're getting different messages about whether or not it's okay to have friends over. And we really were like, oh, that'll be fine. We'll have friends over this whole time.
People who live close to us, who aren't going to work.
Yeah, exactly. So that's basically, that's part of it. And we have it. Go ahead. Please.
I want to follow up on something Nicoya said also, and something that just happened in the chat. So first I want to highlight Nicoya's point in the chat that being open to receiving connection is also really important. And I also want to give a shout out to my fellow introverts and say that, like, it's also totally okay if part of how you regulate is being alone.
Yep.
And so we have this sort of paradox going on where on the one hand, we're likely experiencing more isolation from friends, and it can be really helpful to be conscious about keeping those connections alive. And we also might be in a situation where we're like stuck in the house with the same two people, like Janusz and I are here in our loft, just us and our puppy. And I know I'm also being really conscious about the fact that I do need alone time. And that if Janusz and I don't regulate the way that we're in proximity with each other by being stuck in the house all the time, like, we're going to start driving each other friggin' crazy, So I want to highlight Nicoya's point about also connecting with nature being really nourishing, and that can be a way to experience a kind of connection if you feel like you need some alone time, and to highlight that can be really important too. And to give a shout out to anyone who is kind of stuck in the house with someone you find really difficult or maybe even scary. And I know that the National Suicide Hotlines and I believe the National Domestic Violence Hotlines are still accepting calls. So if you feel like you need support, those are great resources. Easy to Google. I don't have the numbers memorized,
If
but I want to make
if
sure
someone
people
can put those
know
in the chat, that'd be really
resources are
helpful.
there. Yeah. And to as part of this, like, really compassionate perspective that whatever you're experiencing right now is natural and okay. Like, we're honoring our need for connection, and we're honoring our need with others. We're honoring that need for connection with others, and we're honoring the need for connection with ourselves, and we're honoring the need for alone time.
Yeah. And I think that one way to look at this in terms of perspectives, again, we don't know how long this is. This could break tomorrow, and somehow, I don't know, magically some wand is waved and whatever. Probably not necessarily going to happen, but and this could just end much more swiftly than we imagine. The other side of it is that this might not. And so just consider, like, people in world wars where they were shut in, it was dangerous, they couldn't leave, and these sort of like larger isolations. So just to consider, like, what do those people do? How do the people who didn't do very well in those situations, who maybe went a little crazy, what were their actions and what were our actions? And just to prepare for that ahead of time, because listen, this is going to be its own universe of pieces here. We have a little note here from Luigi. Welcome, Luigi. So nice to have you. Do you want to read this one?
Sure. It's Mother's Day here in the UK this weekend, but we're all doubting whether it's a good idea to go on public transport for 2 hours. It's sad that we have to make these compromises. She lives alone. I will have to schedule some video calls. I totally feel you. And I also want to honor that this is a time of sadness and loss.
Yep.
Like, a lot of stuff that we had planned on and we're looking forward to is not happening. And so I think part of bringing a mindful perspective to this time is allowing that sadness, being with it, and like we're talking about, recognizing, like, it's okay to feel sad right now. It makes sense. It makes sense to be disappointed.
Yeah. And also, we it's funny because when we do the live stream, we can watch the numbers or watch, when we talk about accepting sadness, it's like people are like, I'm out. So just remember that accepting sadness is, first of all, vitally necessary, but also like it's our window to be able to experience fulfillment and happiness. If we want happiness, we're going to have to accept what's actually occurring. And our, the biggest opening for freedom is this particular moment right now. So that to me is the biggest key, is be here right now, be with whatever is happening, and allow those little miniature experiences of mourning. If we allow those, then we can have a great opportunity for happiness here. So that's great. I think Renee is joining us here. Renee, thank you so much for joining. Let me get you on the screen.
Hi, Renee.
Great to see you. I haven't seen you in a little while. Let's see. Corner Watch. Excellent. Okay, Renee, welcome.
Thanks. It's great to be here. I am only on Zoom because I was getting like multiple
feedback?
loops of all the conversation. I couldn't figure out how to mute one or the other, so here I am. So I'm looking at Janusz's picture and Nicoya. That's my view. I'm really happy to be here, and I applaud the impulse to see how we can be helpful. The thing that I'm noticing for myself in my practice is that all of a sudden the planner has just like jumped up and has like all kinds of, I can do this and I can do that and I can schedule it this way, and so the meditation that we had this morning was particularly helpful. The guidance that you gave, just to be able to bring the planner into a place where, okay, you can be there. And it's not that I don't know how to do that. I also want to point out that for those of you who are on Facebook, there is this really, truly awesome private group called Coronavirus Discussion Group that you need to request to be admitted to. But these are like incredibly smart people with scientific backgrounds who are reporting things that can be really useful and helpful.
That's great.
When your main channel is the news, the out there and in the environment news. So thanks.
That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Renee, if you would be open to, when you get back on Twitch, just if you can throw that link in the chat, then some people can potentially click that and go through. If not, don't worry about it. People can find it. It's the Corona. Say the name again.
Coronavirus Discussion Group.
Coronavirus Discussion Group. Excellent. Okay, so we have the voice of John Taylor here. I realize I would personally like a nice little oxytocin hit, so I'm going to grab our puppy, our squirmy little worm.
I'll grab her.
Oh, no, do you want to grab her? Okay, you grab her. Okay, so John, I see you jumped here on the Zoom here. I don't see you, but I see that you're here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to unmute you. Is that, if you'd like to, chit chat, tell us about your experience and strategies you're using. Hello, John. No pressure, of course. Maybe you're just here to say hello and visit.
Hello?
Hello, John.
How's it going?
Good, how are you? We hear your voice.
Okay. Clearly anxious about this whole thing. Don't have much wisdom to offer.
Okay. Well, just any strategies or experiences or challenges that are coming up.
Yeah. It's going to be tough because I think my work is going to shut down completely today.
Okay. Sorry to hear that.
That's pretty scary because, if I don't work, I don't get paid.
Right.
And I've got, people to take care of. It's kind of like a situation of not knowing what's going to happen and just trying not to get ahead of myself.
And what do you do? If folks probably might not know, but John is a longtime private student of mine. So, John, what strategies do you use in situations like that? What might you do in that situation?
practice strategies?
Whatever, any strategies, personal strategies. What do you do? I mean, because I'm sure there's other people who are having similar experiences.
Yeah, well one in terms of I would talk about practice. It's the multiple selves practice is really helpful. If you recognize the parts that are sad, are mourning, scared, angry, I think that was a great thing to bring up before. Because I feel like it's so helpful to honor the different things that I'm feeling instead of trying to either block it out and pretend it's not happening or become overwhelmed. So I think that's the key, is to just kind of have respect for the different parts of me and the different feelings that are coming up, and then to kind of look at the whole thing from awareness, essentially.
That's
and
great.
Realize it's all okay, it's all natural, as you were putting.
That's great. Yeah, and that was something we were emphasizing in the practice today, was just that. Well, I was drawing a parallel there because if folks are familiar with the Mind Illuminated community, they talk a lot about this relationship of how we're zooming the mind, or the different ways the mind can sort of apprehend things. One is like single individual things, and another one is as a kind of whole, as a large group. And we can use that skill to just experience the different parts of ourselves. Sometimes we're sucked into one part and we're like, I'm the nervous self. But to recognize that in the context not only of our other experiences of self, but also in the context of our social experience, that there is no such thing as an individual without a society. We are built socially. So to recognize those needs as well, absolutely. That's great. Thank you so much for that, John.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. And let's see if anyone else wants to jump onto the our Zoom here. We also have a little visitor with us, a little cute little visitor. Okay, we have our Zoom link here. Thank you, folks, for joining up. It's really great to see you. Oh, little schnuffer. So if people don't know, this is Sela. This is our 4-month-old miniature schnauzer. She makes all these funny mouth sounds. Sorry, she keeps hitting the microphone.
Like that.
I don't know if you can hear her. So funny. So that's her. That's the way she talks, and so we're really happy to have her here. It's also people cannot believe it because she's such a cutie and such a sweetie, but she's a pain in the butt, and there's a lot of emotion and sort of like smaller versions of the. Is that her making that sound?
Yeah.
Oh my god, I can hear it so loud in the thing. What's it called? A lot of the sort of miniature version of the emotions that happen when a baby arrives, where, I wanted this puppy to love me, and it sort of doesn't exactly, it just wants to be fed. So, there's a lot of emotional stuff came up around this pup. So, it's good to recognize just the whole experience. Whatever's happening is natural, and we can deal with that. We can process that. So, let's see if there's anyone else popping up on the Zoom. If not, oh my goodness, we suddenly see John. Welcome. Let me just, I want to let folks, just so you can say hi here, John.
How you doing?
Hey, this is our friend John. Thanks for joining us. So good to see you.
Glad we're doing this.
Absolutely. So we are going to let everybody out of meditation detention, but before we do, we want to let you know that in less than 24 hours, we're going to be back here.
That's not true.
What?
Less than 24. That would be
48. Less than 48. Sorry, less than 48 hours. Have I been saying that wrong for the last 6 months?
Possibly.
Possible. Less than 48 hours. We are going to be back here. Excuse me. And we'd love to see you here. We're going to be back chatting, and we cover whatever topics are useful, whatever topics people want. So we'll probably be talking about this for some time. And then we'll go from there. So, folks, thank you so much for joining us. Just so you know, okay, Tomalyn, you're here with us. Will you put our Discord link in the chat, just so everyone can see that, and you can put it right on the screen. We have a Discord channel, which is basically it's almost like sort of like Facebook, except minus. I don't think they're like tracking and selling your stuff. Maybe they are, but it's basically a way to stay in touch and ask questions and connect with other people meditating in this community while we're offline. And we also have a place there for questions if you want to ask questions offline, and we can answer those on the stream or answer them offline, etc. So our Discord is here in the chat, and I'm actually going to include that on the. I'm not sure if that's the case, but I think you can search our Discord if you search on at Deep Mindfulness, so one word, at Deep Mindfulness, you can find us there on Discord. Okay, so if you can, there it is on the screen. So folks, we'll be back here in less than 48 hours. Thank you so much for joining us. Radson says the Facebook group is called Coronavirus Discussion Space. Can't come up with a link. All right, well, just search for that stuff, and we look very forward to seeing folks soon. And our puppy is squirming to see you again soon. Hello.
Stay safe. Take care of yourself. Take care of each other.
Yeah, and we're going to put on the ending audio, but just know that we can definitely still see you and stuff. So, it's so great to see everybody.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Together here.
And as you sit there.